So I've always been the family disappointment. Not even joking. My uncle and his side of the family are all about traditional success. Degrees from prestigious universities, high-status careers, the whole package. My cousins Sarah and Jake have been on the golden child track since we were kids. Sarah's in medical school now, Jake's at some fancy law program, and then there's me. I dropped out of college 10 years ago to pursue what I was actually good at, playing with computers as my family loves to call it. My mom never got over it. She wanted a doctor or lawyer son she could brag about at her stupid country club, not some tech guy who wastes time on the internet all day. Anyway, I decided to actually attend Thanksgiving this year after skipping the last three. Big mistake, lol. My mom guilted me into it, saying Grandma might not have many holidays left. She's been saying this for like 7 years straight. I figured I could handle one dinner of passive-aggressive comments. I was wrong. I showed up at my mom's place around 3 p.m. on Thursday. Everything seemed normal at first. Awkward small talk, football on the TV. My uncle already 3 glasses of wine deep. The first dig came from my aunt while I was helping in the kitchen. She asked if I was still doing that computer stuff with this tone, like I'd told her I was professionally playing with Legos or something. When I said yes, she just sighed and said Sarah was crushing it in med school and about to start clinical rotations. Whatever, I'm used to this shit. Dinner was when it really went off the rails. We're all seated around the table, turkey carved, when my Uncle Frank stands up, taps his wine glass with his fork, and looks directly at me. Before we eat, I think we should take a moment to appreciate what failure really looks like, he announces, pointing at me. This dropout who thinks playing with computers is a career. The table went quiet. I just stared at him, not even processing that this was actually happening. My aunt jumps in immediately. While Sarah's excelling in med school and Jake's at Harvard Law, this one still sits in his mom's basement playing games. I don't even live with my mom. I have my own place downtown that costs more than their mortgage, probably. But okay, the worst part, my own mother. She leans over and whispers. But not really whispers, more like that fake whisper meant for everyone to hear. Maybe you should have listened to us about college. Even my cousin Jake added, some people just aren't cut out for success, I guess. And then they all laughed. Like literally laughed at me at the Thanksgiving table. I could have said something. Could have told them that I'm actually a senior infrastructure security architect at one of the largest financial technology companies in the world, that I make more in quarterly bonuses than Jake will make his first year as a lawyer, that I helped design the security protocols that protect literally trillions of dollars in transactions every day. But why bother? They wouldn't understand or care. They'd find some way to minimize it because it's not doctor or lawyer. So I just smiled and said, "You're all absolutely right." Then I ate my turkey, made small talk about the weather, and left as soon as it wasn't rude. My mom texted later saying I seemed distant and should lighten up about the jokes. I didn't respond. Here's where it gets interesting. Friday and the weekend passed normally. I worked on some code, hit the gym, played some games. Regular weekend stuff. Monday morning at 6:08 a.m., my phone starts blowing up. I woke up to 73 missed calls. Not exaggerating, 73. From my mom, uncle, aunt, both cousins, even my grandma, plus about 100 texts all saying variations of "emergency call now" and "what did you do?" I ignored them all and got ready for work. Around 9:30, my doorbell starts ringing non-stop. I check my building's security camera through the app, and there they are, my entire family, looking panicked in the lobby. Against my better judgment, I buzz them up. They all burst into my apartment talking over each other. My uncle was literally shaking. "The bank says only you can fix this. Whatever you did 10 years ago, undo it." Sarah was full-on crying. "I can't pay for med school. None of my loans will process." Jake kept showing me his phone. "The bar exam fees. My accounts are all flagged." My mother grabbed my arm. "Please, we'll lose the house by Friday." I just stood there, completely confused. "What are you talking about? What's happening?" That's when my uncle showed me his phone. It was an email from his bank's security department. All their accounts had been flagged by something called the Griffin Protocol for unusual activity patterns consistent with regulatory violations. Their assets were temporarily frozen pending review. The thing is, I helped create Griffin. It's a new AI-powered security system my company rolled out 3 months ago that scans for certain transaction patterns. I didn't personally flag their accounts. The system did it automatically, but I'm one of only 8 people in the country who can expedite the review process. My family somehow made the connection between me and this system, probably from Googling it desperately. And now they're all standing in my apartment begging the failure to save them. The irony is insane. But here's the kicker. After quickly checking their case numbers, I realized Griffin actually found something legitimate. There's definitely some sketchy shit going on with their finances that triggered multiple red flags. So now I have a choice to make. I'm not going to do anything illegal, but I'm definitely not rushing to help them either. Part of me feels bad, but another part remembers my uncle's smug face announcing my failure to the entire family. They're still in my apartment as I type this. I told them I need to look into it and went to my bedroom to make some calls. What would you do? Update 1. Thanks for all the advice and support. For everyone asking if I've fixed their accounts yet? No, and I'm still deciding what to do. Let me catch you up on the absolute chaos of the last 24 hours. So when I left off, my entire family was camped out in my living room having collective panic attacks while I made some calls from my bedroom. In reality, I was just Googling the exact regulations that Griffin flagged in their accounts. The system is designed to catch specific patterns that indicate potential compliance issues, not just random suspicious activity. I came back out after about 20 minutes to find my uncle pacing around my apartment, touching all my stuff like he owned the place. He picked up my work laptop and I nearly lost it. "Don't touch my fucking equipment," I told him, grabbing it from his hands. He looked shocked that I'd speak to him that way. My mother gave me this look like I was being ridiculous. "You need to fix this now," my uncle said. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to our family?" I asked him to show me the exact notification again. He handed me his phone with the email from his bank. The language was clear. Their accounts were flagged for unusual transaction patterns consistent with multiple regulatory guidelines. Basically banking speak for something sketchy is happening. I needed more information to understand what was going on, so I asked some basic questions. When did this start? What transactions were they trying to make? When was the last successful transaction? That's when things got weird. My uncle and aunt kept looking at each other before answering. Sarah kept checking her phone nervously. Jake started talking over everyone, trying to control the conversation. Their stories weren't lining up. My mom just kept saying that if I really cared about family, I would just turn it off. Like Griffin was some kind of light switch I could flip. I explained that I didn't personally flag their accounts. The AI system did it automatically based on transaction patterns. I could put in a request to expedite review, but I'd need to understand what triggered it first. They did not like that answer. "Do you need to know?" my aunt asked, with this fake smile. "Can't you just overwrite it or whatever?" That raised about 1,000 red flags in my mind. If everything was legit, why were they so resistant to even basic questions? I decided to dig deeper. I grabbed my laptop, the one my uncle tried to snoop through, and asked for their case numbers from the emails. Reluctantly, they provided them. What they didn't know is that with those case numbers and my security clearance, I could see a high-level summary of what triggered the flags, not the full details that would require a formal investigation, but enough to get the picture. And holy shit, what a picture it was. For the past 10 years, there's been a pattern of unusual financial activity flowing through my uncle's business accounts, my aunt's personal accounts, and several shell companies I'd never heard of. Money moving in circles, split into smaller amounts, recombined, and ultimately funding, guess what? Sarah and Jake's education expenses. The red flags were massive, the kind of patterns that typically indicate tax evasion or money laundering. While I was processing this, my uncle was getting more agitated. He started saying things like, I should be grateful to him because he tried to guide me when I was younger. That Sarah and Jake were putting their opportunities to good use, unlike me. That's when something clicked. 10 years ago was when I dropped out of college to pursue my tech career. It's also when I asked my family for help with a coding bootcamp that cost $8,000. They all said they couldn't afford to waste money on my computer hobby. But apparently, they could afford to set up elaborate financial structures to fund Sarah and Jake's expensive educations. Make it make sense. I looked up from my laptop and just stared at my mother. "Did you know about this?" I asked her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was answer enough. The room got really quiet. I shut my laptop and stood up. "I need time to review this," I told them. "This isn't something I can just make disappear with a keystroke." My uncle got in my face then. "You will fix this," he said, jabbing his finger at my chest. "Your little power trip ends now." I pushed his hand away. "Don't touch me," I said. That's when he grabbed my arm hard. It's amazing how quickly family shows their true colors when money is involved. I twisted away from him and backed up. "Get out of my apartment, all of you," I said. My mother started crying, saying I was being cruel. Sarah called me selfish. Jake threatened to ruin my career if I didn't help them. I've never been good at confrontation, but something inside me had finally snapped. I was done being the family punching bag. I walked to my door and held it open. "Either you leave now, or I call building security," I told them. "And trust me, the last thing you want is more attention on your finances right now." They left, but not before my mother tried one last guilt trip. She said my father would be so disappointed in me. My father who died when I was 14. My father who was the only one who ever supported my interest in computers. That father. After they left, I sat down and really looked at what Griffin had flagged. The system doesn't make mistakes, it's designed to find patterns that human auditors might miss. And the patterns in my family's finances were textbook examples of what the system was built to catch. I spent the rest of the day trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to just let the system do its job and let whatever happens happen. But another part of me knew this could potentially ruin them financially and legally. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "We need to talk. Just us, please." I agreed to meet her for coffee the next morning at the cafe near my place. I figured she might be more forthcoming without my uncle around. When I got there at 9 a.m., she was already waiting. She looked like she hadn't slept. Before I could even sit down, she slid a folder across the table. I opened it and found old financial documents, bank statements, and a letter from my father written right before he died. As I read through everything, I felt sick. Turns out my father had set up a college fund for me before he passed, a substantial one. But after he died, my uncle helped my mom manage the finances, and somehow, that money never made it to me. Instead, it became the seed money for the financial arrangement that was now funding Sarah and Jake's education. My mother claimed she didn't understand what was happening at first, that my uncle convinced her it was better for the family this way, that I was throwing away my future by pursuing technology instead of a real career, so the money would be wasted on me. She was crying now, saying she realized too late what had happened, and by then, she was complicit. I just sat there, staring at my father's handwriting on the letter he'd written specifically about my education fund. The coffee grew cold as I tried to process that not only had my family been mocking me for years, they'd literally stolen from me to fund the cousins they deemed more worthy. All those years of being treated like the family failure, of struggling to pay for my education while Sarah and Jake got everything handed to them. It was all built on money that should have been mine. I closed the folder and looked at my mother. "You need to tell me everything," I said. "Every account, every transaction, every conversation. And then I'll decide what happens next. Because I'm not just going to fix this for them. Not anymore. They're going to face consequences. And I'm going to make sure they never forget who the real failure in this family is." Update 2. It's been a wild 48 hours since my last update. First, thanks for all the comments and DMs. Some of you guessed exactly what was happening before I even figured it out myself, lol. So, after meeting with my mom and finding out my uncle basically stole my college fund to pay for my cousin's education, I was beyond pissed. I spent that night going through all the documents she gave me, cross-referencing everything with what Griffin had flagged. The picture it painted was fucking infuriating. My dad had set aside almost $200,000 for my education before he died. $200,000. And my uncle Frank, who my mom trusted to help with finances after dad passed, had systematically moved that money through a series of accounts, ultimately using it as collateral for loans that funded Sarah and Jake's fancy schools. I barely slept. By 6 a.m., I'd made my decision. I texted everyone in the family that we needed to meet at my mom's house at noon. No excuses. I made it clear that I had information about their financial situation that they needed to hear. When I pulled up to Mom's place, everyone's cars were already there. Perfect. I grabbed my laptop bag and a folder of printed documents and walked in without knocking. The tension in the room was immediate. My uncle was pacing by the window. Sarah was sitting with her head in her hands. Jake was typing furiously on his phone. My aunt was comforting my mom, who looked like she hadn't slept either. Nobody said hello. Frank immediately started in about how I needed to fix this situation immediately because they were getting more notices from their banks. I set my laptop on the coffee table and just stared at him until he stopped talking. Then I asked one simple question. "Who's Frank Davidson?" The room went dead silent. Frank Davidson was the name on several of the shell company documents, a name I'd never heard before yesterday. My uncle's face went from red to white in seconds. That's when I laid it all out. I explained exactly what Griffin had found. A decade-long pattern of financial manipulation involving my father's estate, particularly the money that was meant for my education. I explained how they'd use that money as collateral for loans and other financial arrangements that funded Sarah and Jake's schooling, while telling me there was no money to help with my coding boot camp. I pulled out copies of my father's original will and the letter he'd written specifically about my education fund. I placed them on the table next to the records of transfers my uncle had orchestrated starting just months after my dad died. My uncle tried to interrupt, saying it was complicated, and I wouldn't understand the financial decisions that had to be made, that my dad didn't understand modern education costs, and the money would have been wasted on computer games. I cut him off and opened my laptop. I pulled up a screen showing exactly what Griffin had flagged, specific transactions that violated multiple banking regulations. I explained in precise technical detail why these transactions triggered the system and what the potential consequences were. Jake suddenly got very interested in what I was saying. He asked if this could affect his ability to pass the character and fitness evaluation for the bar. I told him it absolutely would if formal investigations were opened. Sarah started crying again, asking what this meant for her student loans. I reminded her that financial fraud can lead to disqualification from many professional licensing boards. That's when my uncle completely lost it. He started shouting that I was threatening them, that I had no right to question his financial decisions. He said my father would have approved of his choices because my cousins were using their education properly, while I was wasting my potential. I laughed in his face. That's when I finally told him exactly what I do for a living. Not just that I work with computers, but that I'm one of the senior architects who designed the financial security system that caught them. That I make more money in a year than most of them will see in 5. That the company I helped build protects trillions in transactions globally. The look on their faces was priceless. Total shock. Like they couldn't process that the failure they'd been mocking for years was actually... My uncle recovered first. He tried a new approach, saying he'd always seen my potential and was just trying to motivate me with tough love. That the family had always been proud of me, but worried about my path. I pulled up texts and emails from over the years. All the times they'd mocked my career choice, turned down requests for help, invited me to family events only to use me as the punchline. My mom just sat there crying. My aunt tried to blame everything on my uncle. Sarah and Jake were furiously whispering to each other in the corner. Jake suddenly asked if I could just override Griffin for them, since I helped create it. He said they'd make it right with me if I could just make this go away. I told them I could help them navigate this situation legally, but I would not do anything unethical or illegal. I explained that they had 3 options. 1, I could recuse myself completely and let the standard investigation process play out, which would likely result in criminal charges given what I'd seen. 2, I could help them pursue a voluntary disclosure process, which would mean penalties and repayment, but possibly avoid criminal charges. 3, they could try to fight it, but given the evidence, they would lose badly. But I had conditions. First, full financial transparency. Second, they would need to legally acknowledge the theft of my education fund with a plan for restitution. Third, a formal recognition of my role in resolving the situation. My uncle called me an ungrateful little shit, said I was extorting them. My aunt asked if I really wanted to destroy the family over ancient history. I reminded them that they came to me for help, that they were the ones who had broken the law, that they were the ones who had stolen from a dead man's son. And then I showed them one last document, an email from my dad to my uncle 2 weeks before he died, expressing how proud he was that I was teaching myself coding, and how he believed I'd do amazing things with technology someday. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Jake spoke up. He said I was bluffing, that I couldn't possibly have the authority I claimed at my company. Then he threatened to contact my employer directly to report me for using company systems for personal vendettas. I just laughed and handed him my business card, told him to ask for my direct supervisor when he called, mentioned that all system accesses are logged, and all my queries were legitimate given the family connection to the flagged accounts. I packed up my laptop, left copies of all the documents on the table, and walked toward the door. I told them they had 24 hours to decide which option they wanted to pursue before I formally recused myself from their case. As I reached for the doorknob, my uncle said something I'll never forget. He said the reason he'd always been hard on me was because my father had told him once that I was smarter than all of them combined, that he'd been threatened by a 14-year-old and had spent the last 16 years trying to prove my father wrong. I turned around, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "How's that working out for you?" Then I walked out and drove home. My phone's been blowing up since I left. Text messages ranging from apologies to threats. My mom called 7 times. I haven't answered any of them yet. I just got an email from Jake saying they're contacting my company's ethics department tomorrow morning if I don't fix this immediately. They still don't get it. They still think I'm the same pushover they could manipulate for years. They're about to find out exactly how wrong they are. Final update. First, thanks for all the support on my previous posts. A lot has happened in the past week and it's been a fucking roller coaster. When I left off, Jake had threatened to contact my company's ethics department if I didn't magically fix their financial situation by the next morning. Well, guess what happened at 8:17 a.m. the next day? My phone rang, my actual boss, Evan. Not my team lead, not my department head. The actual CTO of the entire company. My stomach dropped for half a second before I realized what was happening. Hey, Evan, let me guess. You got a call from someone claiming to be my cousin about an ethics violation, I said before he could even start. He laughed, said he'd received an interesting call from a very aggressive law student who demanded I be fired immediately for abusing company resources for personal vendettas. Evan asked if I wanted to explain what was going on. I gave him the Cliff Notes version, family financial accounts flagged by Griffin, discovery of misappropriated funds from my dad's estate, their demands that I override the system illegally. I assured him I'd followed all proper protocols and had already planned to officially recuse myself that morning. Evan was quiet for a moment, then just said, "So they stole from you, mocked you for years, and now they're trying to get you fired because our system caught them doing something shady?" Basically, yeah. His response was simple. Forward me everything you have, officially recuse yourself from the case, and let me handle the communications with your family. Then he added that this was exactly why they'd built Griffin's logging system the way they had, so that legitimate investigations couldn't be manipulated by personal relationships. After I hung up, I submitted the official recusal form, documenting my family connection to the flagged accounts. I forwarded all the evidence to Evan, including documentation of my father's stolen education fund. Then I waited. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Your boss is an asshole." I laughed out loud. Evan must have shut him down hard. At 3 p.m., my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying they'd received an official email from my company explaining that I had recused myself from their case and that due to the attempted interference and threats, all communications would now go through official channels only. Basically, they'd fucked themselves even harder by trying to get me fired. That evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Sarah. Jake won't admit it, but we're scared. Mom's a mess. What's going to happen to us?" I decided to answer this one. "You'll go through the standard investigation process. Be honest, cooperate fully, and get a good financial attorney. I can't be involved anymore." She replied immediately, "But we're family. You can't just abandon us." I almost threw my phone. These people had spent years treating me like garbage, stole my education fund, and now had the audacity to play the family card? I typed back, "Weird, that's exactly what I said when I needed $8,000 for my coding bootcamp, and you all told me to get a real education instead." She didn't respond. The next day, I received a forwarded email from Evan. My family had been assigned to the standard investigation team. The initial assessment flagged potential violations in 7 different categories, including fraudulent loan applications, tax issues, and improper use of estate funds. They were given a formal list of required documentation and a timeline for compliance. I also received an unexpected email from my company's legal department requesting information about my father's estate and the education fund that was supposedly set aside for me. They explained that during the investigation, if misappropriation of my inheritance was confirmed, I might be entitled to restitution. Meanwhile, my phone continued blowing up with texts and calls from family members, ranging from angry accusations to desperate pleas. I ignored all of them except for one call from my grandmother, who genuinely seemed confused about what was happening. I explained the situation as gently as I could, including what my uncle had done with my father's money. She went quiet, then said she'd always wondered how Frank had managed to pay for those kids' fancy schools. 3 days later, Evan invited me to lunch. Over sandwiches, he told me my family's case had become something of a priority because the investigation team had identified a pattern that could help refine Griffin's detection algorithms. He also mentioned that my uncle had tried to contact several other executives at the company, each time digging himself deeper into trouble. By the end of the week, my uncle received a formal compliance plan. The document, which Evan shared with me as part of our system improvement discussion, laid out exactly what my family needed to do to resolve the situation. It included full financial disclosure of all accounts and transactions for the past 10 years, documented explanation of specific flagged transactions, filing of amended tax returns for the affected years, repayment of improperly obtained funds, with interest and penalties, a formal remediation plan for the misappropriated estate funds, my education money. The penalties were significant but not criminal, yet. If they cooperated fully, they might avoid charges. But Sarah and Jake's education funding would be considered improperly obtained, meaning they'd need to refinance their loans without the fraudulent collateral. My uncle and aunt would need to pay substantial penalties, and they would all need to repay me the original $200,000 plus interest. On Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. It was my mother, alone. She looked terrible, exhausted and defeated. I almost didn't let her in, but decided to hear what she had to say. She placed a manila envelope on my coffee table. Inside was a handwritten letter of apology and a cashier's check for $20,000, apparently all she could pull together immediately. She said it was the first installment of paying back what they took from me. I asked her why they had always treated me like I was nothing. Why my own mother had sat silently for years while her brother mocked her son. Why she had helped hide the fact that my father had believed in me enough to set aside money specifically for my future. She didn't have good answers, just excuses about being overwhelmed after Dad died, about how Frank had always been the successful one she looked up to, about how she didn't understand what I was doing with computers and worried I was throwing my life away. I told her the check was a start, but not enough. Not just the money, but everything else too. The years of belittling me, of making me feel like I wasn't good enough. I told her I would accept the payment as the first installment, but that I expected the full repayment plan to be followed. Before she left, she asked if I would ever forgive them. I told her honestly that I didn't know. The following week, I received an official letter from my company's legal department confirming that as part of the resolution of the investigation, I would receive full restitution of my misappropriated inheritance, with interest. It would be paid in installments over the next 5 years. I also received formal notifications that my uncle's business accounts had been placed under monitoring protocols, that Sarah and Jake's educational funding had been restructured, resulting in significantly higher monthly payments for them, and that my aunt and uncle had been required to take financial compliance training. 2 weeks after the initial confrontation, I got a text from Jake asking if we could meet. I suggested a coffee shop near my office. When I arrived, both Jake and Sarah were there, looking like they hadn't slept in days. The conversation was awkward at first. They avoided eye contact, staring into their coffee cups. Finally, Jake spoke up. He admitted they'd always been jealous of how easily I learned things, how I could understand complex concepts faster than they could. They'd grown up hearing their parents compare them unfavorably to me in private, even while mocking me in public. Sarah said they'd had no idea about the money from my dad's estate. They thought their parents had taken out legitimate loans for their education. Finding out that their accomplishments were built on money stolen from me had broken something inside them. I listened without interrupting. When they finished, I told them I didn't hate them, but I also wasn't ready to play happy cousins again. I explained that what hurt the most wasn't just the stolen money, but the years of being treated like I was worthless. Before we parted, Jake handed me an envelope. Inside was a formal letter acknowledging their awareness of the misappropriated funds and their commitment to making things right, including taking responsibility for a portion of the repayment themselves, not just leaving it to their parents. It was signed by both of them. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, but it was something. Yesterday was Thanksgiving again. Exactly 1 year since the dinner where my uncle stood up and mocked me in front of everyone. I declined the invitation to join the family meal, choosing instead to spend the day with friends. But this morning, I received an email from my uncle. The subject line was simply, "You won." The body of the email was brief. "You were right. I was wrong. I've spent my life measuring success by the wrong metrics. What you've built with your mind is worth more than any degree or title. I'm paying for that mistake now, financially and otherwise. Your father would be proud of you. I'm sorry I couldn't see what he saw. I haven't responded yet. I might not ever, but I saved the email." The real revenge wasn't getting them in trouble or taking their money. It was forcing them to see me, really see me, for who I am and what I've accomplished, and to acknowledge, finally, that my path was valid all along. Sometimes the best revenge is making them admit you were right.